Hey there, and welcome to another deep dive in today's explainer. I am so glad you're here because we're about to unpack a single piece of data that is, frankly, going to completely shatter and then rebuild how we think about our collective well-being. You know, if you're anything like me, you probably walk around with this unspoken, kind of heavy baseline assumption about what a quote-unquote standard human body and mind should feel like, right? We hold ourselves to this absolute frictionless standard of perfection. But what if I told you that standard is entirely fabricated? Today, we're diving into some stark data that proves our whole definition of health needs a massive paradigm shift. Section 1. The illusion of perfect health. So, society kind of teaches us that a state of perfect health, zero aches, zero ailments, zero diagnoses, is just the default setting of the human machine. And because of this illusion, anytime our machine doesn't run perfectly, we immediately assume something is fundamentally wrong with us. So, I want to pose a question to you right off the bat, and I want you to really think about it for a second. What does it actually mean to be healthy? When you get a medical diagnosis from a doctor, whether that's a chronic physical thing, a mental health condition, or just some ongoing ailment you have to manage, do you view it as this isolating anomaly? Like, do you immediately feel like you've fallen off the normal wagon, suddenly separated from the rest of the supposedly perfectly healthy population walking around out there?
Well, let's actually look at the philosophical definition of the word normal. It's defined as the standard, usual, or typical state or condition within a population. Right? So this is a purely mathematical, objective concept. It's not about some idealized dream state. It's about what is actually typical. And yet, culturally, we've completely conflated ideal with normal. We assume that being totally free of any clinically diagnosed health conditions is the global standard. We think a totally clean bill of health is the usual state. But data has a really funny way of completely overriding our cultural assumptions.
Section 2. The staggering global statistic.
The data we're about to look at proves the human baseline is absolutely not what you think it is. And I want to build a little anticipation here, because for anyone tuning into this explainer who currently feels burdened or isolated or maybe even fundamentally broken by a diagnosis, you're about to see with absolute mathematical certainty that you are not alone, not even close. 95%. Just let the sheer, overwhelming weight of that number sink in for a second. 95%. This isn't just a slight majority, this isn't a statistical lean, we are talking about near totality. When we finally pull the rug out from under our assumptions and actually look at the data, this is the number staring right back at us. But what exactly does this 95% represent?
Section 3. Visualizing the reality.
To put this into perspective, imagine a giant pie chart where one slice consumes almost the entire thing, 95% of it, leaving only a minuscule, practically imperceptible 5% sliver. Think about every single person you walk past today, every colleague in your office, everyone in your family. Statistically speaking, virtually everyone you know is sitting comfortably inside that massive 95% slice.
And here is the undeniable fact that this represents. 95% of the population have one or more clinically diagnosed health conditions. Let me repeat that, because it is literally a game changer. 95% of the global population lives with at least one health condition. This completely rewrites the script, doesn't it? That overwhelming majority represents almost all of humanity. Having an ailment, managing a diagnosis, treating a condition, this isn't the exception at all. It is the rule.
Section 4. The 5% minority. So we have this wild contrast that completely flips our societal expectations on their head. On one side, you have the 95%, living with at least one condition. And on the other, the 5%, the absolute minority with zero conditions. For years, society has conditioned us to believe that having zero conditions is the baseline, and that falling into the other group means something has gone wrong. But statistically, mathematically, and biologically, being perfectly healthy with zero diagnoses is actually a rare 5% exception. The perfectly healthy person is the anomaly.
Section 5. Redefining what normal means.
Okay, so this data totally forces us to redefine what normal actually means. Just think about how much mental energy we spend feeling isolated by a diagnosis. We almost always ask, why me, when we're confronted with a health challenge. But looking at the reality of global health, the more statistically accurate question would actually be, why wouldn't it be me? You're simply participating in the standard human experience.
So the crucial takeaways here are pretty clear. First, 95% is the vast global majority. It's almost everyone. Second, that 5% perfectly healthy group is a statistical anomaly, not the standard we should be ruthlessly comparing ourselves to. And third, having a diagnosed condition, whether it's physical, mental, chronic, or acute, is the global norm. We really need to destigmatize the reality of living with a health condition, because frankly, it's something almost all of us are doing.
And this brings us to the absolute core of today's explainer. Having a health condition is not an anomaly. It is the overwhelming human baseline. Really let that sink in. If you have a condition, you're not broken. You're not a deviation from the standard. You are the standard. You belong to the overwhelming majority of humanity that's just navigating life while managing the very normal, everyday complexities of the human body.
Which leaves me with one final, deeply personal question for you to ponder long after we wrap up today. How does knowing you're part of the overwhelming 95% shift your perspective on your own well-being? If having one or more clinically diagnosed health conditions is simply part of being human, how much grace can you start giving yourself today? I really hope this data empowers you, makes you feel a little less isolated, and fundamentally changes how you view the normal human experience. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep questioning those baselines.